Mission Impossible 3. I actually really like this one. I know compared to the later Mission Impossible films, it doesn't really compare as much, but I think this is a really good start to this kind of whole kind of reboot of the Mission Impossible franchise, because the first one was pretty good, the second one was kind of but I really enjoyed this one. The fact that J.J. Abrams came on to this one, because I know that there was a lot of different directors that were involved in it. Like David Fincher was originally supposed to be the original director for it, but he dropped out due to creative differences, and then another director, Joe Carnahan, was supposed to be in it, but then there was more creative differences, so he dropped out. And there's like other different actors that were going to be involved in it, but they dropped out just due to like all the production delays that were going on. And then eventually they brought on J.J. Abrams, and he was able to take the helm, because I know like the behind the scenes were that Tom Cruise was a very big fan of J.J. Abrams' Alias show, which is actually a really good show. I haven't seen the whole series, but I've seen a couple episodes, and it definitely has that kind of spy thriller feel to it, which J.J. Abrams brought along to Mission Impossible, which is really, really good. So he was brought on to kind of take the helm and kind of take on the production from there. And I think he honestly did a really good job. I think coming from television, he was doing like Felicity and Alias, which got him the job for this one. There's been a lot of criticism that it kind of feels like a kind of like a small movie in a way, compared to the previous Mission Impossible movies, where it feels very like TV-esque. I think honestly JJ does a really good job at focusing on the characters a lot rather than the grand action. Like there's a lot of like great action sequences in it, but I think he's really good at doing really good like character motivated drama and action. The fact that we start off with Ethan Hunt kind of wanting to kind of retire from the IMF and just have like a normal family life, and trying to like get married and just live a normal life. We see that opening scene where he's at the engagement party, and he's kind of playing down his job, like his kind of like his fake job, his fake alias job. His fiance's friends are just like, "Are you sure you want to marry this guy? He's kind of boring." But yeah, you really know he's this this spy who's been retired and all this stuff. So I think that's a really good like premise to start off with. Just like right off the bat, we kind of have that kind of in medias res scene where it shows Tom Cruise, he's like strapped to the chair, and he sees his wife strapped to the chair as well with a tape on her mouth, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman's character is like, "Where's the rabbit's foot?" And then Tom Cruise is like, "I don't know where the rabbit's foot is." Like, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman's character is like, "I'm gonna give you 10 seconds if you don't say, I'm gonna like blow her brains out," and all this stuff. And it's this really intense scene, and really just sets the tone for what's going to happen with the rest of the movie. I think it does a really good job with like the twists and turns in the story, where you don't really know like what's coming. It starts off with Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt, just trying to retire, and then he gets called back in the field by like Billy Crudup's character of like having this whole rescue mission of like one of these field operatives that Ethan actually trained, played by Kerry Russell, who actually worked with JJ on Felicity. And you think it's going to be this whole routine rescue mission that they're going to have to extract her out of this base where she was kidnapped. And then they eventually have the fun action scene of like getting into the base and retrieving the laptops and retrieving Kerry Russell's character. And this whole twist of like she's like placing her hands on her head, she's like, "What they implanted me with something," and then the whole turn in the story of like this IED device that gets implanted in her head and it explodes, and then she ends up getting killed. And that kind of really sets the tone for the rest of the film, where you think it's going to be this fun Mission Impossible story, and then you kind of add that drama into it as well, and then kind of the story kind of goes on from there. But yeah, I really think like the plotting's really good, the action's really good. Kind of like starts off pretty small, TVS, but then it kind of builds and builds and builds, and becomes like the classic Mission Impossible movies that we've seen. Kind of really sets the stage for the rest of the series, like 4, 5, and 6, and then with Dead Reckoning that comes out later this year. JJ, especially with this being his first movie, I think it's really impressive for a debut. You would think that this would be like his second or third film or something to kind of build up to this, but like no, just right off the bat, it's just like boom, Mission Impossible 3. I think honestly does a really good job. But yeah, back to the story. Later on, Ethan Hunt finds out about this little microchip that was sent on this little telegram that Terry Russell sent him, and Benji, played by by Simon Pegg, deciphers it, and then realizes that it has to do with Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, about his location and everything. So they kind of go rogue in a way to kind of find him in the Vatican City and extract him. And we have that whole kind of fun switcheroo scene where, they kidnap Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, and then they put in the prosthetic face mask for Ethan Hunt to make him look like Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. So then you have that scene where they're in the bathroom together, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman's like looking in the bathroom mirror, and then he sees like himself behind him, and you have this kind of like, it's like, is he seeing double and all that? So I thought that was a really fun scene. And then they extract him, and they're like interrogating him, like what's going on, like what are you up to? And then he's obviously not going to be talking, so they try to send him back to the IMF, the bridge scene, and then they have that whole epic action scene, the helicopters coming in, like shooting at Ethan and Ving Rhames' character, and they finally extract Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. And it's kind of like that all hope is lost kind of sequence where it's just like, okay, what's going to happen next? And the whole twist and turn of Ethan gets captured and by the IMF because he went rogue, and then you think that Billy Crup's on his side because he mouths the location of like where the rabbit's foot is, like it's in Shanghai, and then he helps him escape. And so Ethan escapes, meets up with his team, goes to Shanghai, and have that whole like fun action scene of him trying to figure out how to get from one building to the next, and have like that kind of like swing from one building to the other, and that whole fun action scene. I guess the only like criticism with that is like kind of goes into that building and like gets the rabbit's foot, but we don't really get to see anything. It goes in, the team's kind of like communicating, and then we finally see him kind of like rushing out with the rabbit's foot. It's like, oh, that could have been a really cool opportunity to actually see like what he was doing, like with the rabbit's foot, how he got it and all that. But oh well. So yeah, they finally get the rabbit's foot, and then he's about to take it to Philip Seymour Hoffman because it gives him like 48 hours to find it, or he's going to kill Julia, Ethan Hunt's fiance. So it kind of creates all that tension from there. So they meet up in that kind of junkyard where he gets like sedated and then goes to sleep, and then we kind of pick up where we left off from that opening scene where he's kind of being interrogated, and then with the whole twist of it actually being the translator that he kills. But he really just saw it just to kind of test Ethan to see like how authentic his reaction is to the rabbit's foot, like if it was real or not. So then Billy Crup's character finally comes in, breaks him out. Ethan knocks him out unconscious, and he kind of goes after Julia in Shanghai. We have that whole epic running sequence where like it's just like a minute of Tom Cruise just doing his classic running, and then it's just like this whole like really epic pan throughout the city of Shanghai until they get to that kind of like that warehouse location. He sees Julia like all tied up, tries to free her, realizes from that opening scene that he has the chip actually implanted in his own brain, and that he has to use the defibrillator to shock him, to disengage it, and then bring him back to life. And so Julia tries to do that, but then Philip Seymour Hoffman comes in, fights Ethan. He activates the chip, and he's kind of like all punch drunk and everything. And they have their whole fight. He tries to threaten Julia by killing her, and then that kind of gives Ethan the motivation to kind of go after him and fight him off and all this stuff. I guess another criticism is the way that Ethan actually takes out Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. They're like fighting outside, and then Philip has Ethan like on the ground, pinning him down, and then Ethan looks up and sees a car driving towards him, so he like lifts Philip up, and then he gets hit by the car, and there's like thunk. It was kind of like a little cartoony ending right there. I thought it'd be kind of a more of an epic fight, but it's Mission Impossible. I guess you have to have kind of those like comedic on the nose sequences, I suppose. But anyway, so then he goes back in. Chip is being activated. Julia has to defibrillate him, shocks his heart. He gets knocked out. And before she tries to revive him, Billy Crup's character comes in, and then a couple other of the henchmen come in. She shoots them because Ethan had that previous scene of like teaching her how to fire a gun and everything, because she doesn't have any experience with that. So she kills them. Kills Billy Crudup, tries to revive him, does the resuscitation, and then of course the classic, when all hope seems lost, he revives, and then happily ever after and all that. they had their previous scene, like before he goes off on the mission, of them being married, just the two of them, and then the witness, so then they're all married. And then, they go off into their honeymoon. He meets up with Lawrence Fishburne's character, who he thought was a traitor, but is actually, an ally. And then he's like, hey, what are you gonna be up to? It's like, oh, just gonna go on my honeymoon and all that. It's like, hey, we need you, next time, we'll give you a call. So yeah, I think that overall it's a pretty fun movie. A lot of good, like, stunts. Obviously Tom Cruise does all of his own stunts. Like I said before, like the epic running shot where it's just like panning and everything, is pretty iconic. And the movies kind of go on from there, where and all the other Tom Cruise movies where he's doing all his own stunts, which I think is pretty impressive. That now that he's like 60 years old and he's doing like all these crazy stunts and everything. I just hope that one of these stunts don't like kill him eventually, and kind of ends the Mission Impossible franchise and like all these other franchises and stuff. But yeah, I mean, if he's willing to do it, he's willing to put the butts in the seats, then all power to him. But yeah, at least for these earlier movies when he was he was capable of doing it. I think he was maybe in his like 40s doing these movies, so he was capable of it. But yeah, I just hope he slows down as these Mission Impossible movies go on. The special effects are pretty great. They're not really over the top. They're really just kind of used to kind of enhance the story a little bit more. And I mean, there's like some points where the visual effects are a little bit over the top and stuff. But I mean, everything seems like pretty grounded. Compared to like the later movies. Obviously there's a lot of visual effects scenes, but I appreciate that Tom Cruise really wants to do a lot of his own stunts for real. Like later on with Ghost Protocol, where he's climbing up the building, or like Rogue Nation, where he's like hanging onto the side of the plane, or like Fallout, where he's like skydiving and everything. It's a testament to like how much he cares about the film industry surviving. Getting people into the theater. Top Gun Maverick, he's actually flying all those fighters and everything. So yeah, so I appreciate that he does all of his own stunts and all the visuals. He tries to do like for real and tries to have them be like as authentic as possible. Yeah, and then another thing is just Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance. R.I.P. He's a fantastic actor. Just right off the bat, you just feel that tension from him, just seeing how much of a threat he can be to Ethan Hunt and to the other supporting characters. But yeah, his performance is great. Like I said before, I'm not a fan of like how he went out in the movie, his death and everything. But I think other than that, he's very like dramatic, threatening, imposing. Probably like one of the most memorable villains in Mission Impossible, besides like maybe like the fifth movie with that villain. Like I thought he was pretty good. But yeah, he's definitely like one of like the iconic villains of the Mission Impossible franchise. And I appreciate all the work they did for sure. And finally, just like I said before, I think this is like a good kind of like reboot to the Mission Impossible franchise. It's not as good as like Rogue Nation or Ghost Protocol or Fallout, but I do appreciate that all those other movies kind of draw aspects from this movie, because the first two are kind of self-contained, but this one really feels like it kind of sets the stage for like the future movies. Introducing Michelle Monaghan's character and Simon Pegg's character, and reintroducing Ving Rhames' character, and just having some storylines that carry on throughout the rest of the Mission Impossible franchise. So yeah, I definitely appreciate it for that for sure. And I think J.J. Abrams did a really good job going from television to the films, this being his debut. And he did a really, really good job at revitalizing the franchise. And yeah, great job.